Hello and welcome. You're watching COVID 360, a show where we get you a 360-degree view of the COVID-19 situation in India. On the show today, we talk about India's COVID R value, what it means really. Also, a new concern, black fungus in patients who have recovered from COVID-19. Well, as far as vaccines are concerned, it appears another vaccine is set to get emergency use authorization in India. Which one is that? We're getting you all the details. I'm Sneha Mordani. First up, India's R value has dropped to 1.16. It's the lowest since March. State lockdowns seem to be helping. Experts explain what exactly does this really mean when it comes to the caseload of COVID-19 reducing in India, and does a reduction in R value translate to a reduction in total number of new cases that we are seeing? India's effective reproduction rate, or R value, an indicator of how fast the infection is spreading, has reduced to 1.12 this week from 1.40 last week. This is an estimate of the number of people one COVID patient can infect. Even though India's active cases continue to increase, a reduction in R value indicates that the infection is spreading slower than before.
The drop in effective reproduction number means that the number of people who are getting infected from those who are already infected, that number is reducing, which means the rate at which the number of cases are spreading is going to decelerate. So for example, if 1,000 would have become 2,000 and then 4,000 cases, instead of that, from 1,000 it will become 1,200, then 1,400. So the speed of transmission will reduce, but the numbers will not immediately come down.
Experts say the R rate needs to be below 1% for us to heave a sigh of relief.
To say that the entire curve is flattened or we have gained some amount of control over this outbreak, the effective reproduction number should drop below 1. That's when we would have reached a reasonably manageable loads of cases.
India Today's Data Intelligence Unit has found that in the week beginning 3rd of May, R value for India has dropped to 1.12. 5 states have R value of less than 1. Among major states, Andhra Pradesh is the only one which has shown slight increase in R value in the ongoing week compared to the last week. Chhattisgarh, Delhi, Madhya Pradesh, Maharashtra, UP are among states where R value has dropped below 1 in the ongoing week. R value in Bihar have reduced to 1.14 after more than a month.
So R naught is actually a function of the number of tests that the states have been doing in our country. So if the R naught is actually falling, you shouldn't actually think that the epidemic is totally under control. We need to also have a look into different parameters, like especially the number of tests and the test positivity rate.
In simple math, if you have one patient infecting one person, then you have 2 patients a day. But if you have one patient infecting more than 2 people, then the cases will multiply to 4 and 8 and so on. In that sense, it appears that the R rate is reflective, or rather indicative of the fact that keeping people at home during the lockdown has helped. But experts say take this with a pinch of salt, because this depends on diagnosis via test. And these things are getting questioned in the country right now as to how effectively the testing is happening, how effectively the diagnosis is happening. In New Delhi, Sneha Mordani for India Today. Well, COVID-induced black fungus cases reported in Delhi hospitals are also now being seen in Gujarat. This has got doctors worried. Here's more. It is called the black fungus, and this infection is back. Delhi's Sir Gangaram Hospital, which has seen cases of mucormycosis earlier, is also reporting a surge in this fungal infection once again. Last year, this deadly infection caused a high mortality, with many patients suffering from loss of eyesight, removal of the nose and jawbone. This infection is seen in patients who have recovered from COVID-19.
Major signs and symptoms of this mucormycosis kind of a fungal infection is the swelling around the face, mainly in the paranasal region. Along with that, orbital swelling, eye swelling, discharge from the nose. These kind of features we are seeing in the post-COVID patients.
Many COVID patients have diabetes as comorbidity, and this could be one of the reasons for this rise in black fungus infection once again. COVID patients with weak immunity are more prone to this deadly infection. Doctors say the infection is worse this time around.
पिछले साल हम लोगों ने कोविड की महामारी के बाद बहुत सारे केसेस ब्लैक फंगस या म्यूकोरमाइकोसिस के देखे थे। इस साल इस बीमारी का और बुरे तरीके से हम लोगों पर आना बहुत एक संभावना है और इसका इलाज एम्फोट्रिसिन यानी कि एंटी फंगल दवाई से अस्पताल में और बाद में कुछ सर्जरीज से भी जरूरी है, अदरवाइज ये जानलेवा बीमारी है।
At least 40 cases of black fungus have been reported from Surat and Gujarat among those who have recovered from COVID-19. Of the 40, 8 have lost their eyesight. The number of such cases has increased as Gujarat sees an exponential rise in coronavirus infections. The infection triggered by COVID-19 is treatable, but if left untreated or if the treatment is delayed, the condition can lead to the loss of vision and in some cases, increased mortality. The general symptoms include one-sided facial swelling, headache, nasal or sinus congestion, black lesions on nasal bridge or upper inside of mouth that quickly become more severe. Symptoms of pulmonary mucormycosis includes fever, cough, chest pain and shortness of breath. Gastrointestinal mucormycosis includes abdominal pain, nausea, vomiting and gastrointestinal bleeding. The US Center for Disease Control or CDC says that black fungus is rare, but it's serious. Doctors say use of steroids in the treatment of COVID-19 coupled with the fact that many coronavirus patients have diabetes could be one of the reasons for the rise in the number of black fungus cases once again. With Sanjay Rathod in Surat and Milan Sharma, Sneha Mordani in Delhi for India Today. India Today has spoken exclusively to Dr. Sharvil Patel, the Managing Director of Zydus Cadila. The company says they're hopeful of getting an approval for their DNA vaccine against COVID-19, and this certainly is music to our ears, given the kind of shortage India is seeing in vaccine doses. Take a look. Just to give us an idea about what is the status as far as ZyCoV-D is concerned, when is Zydus Cadila then going to ask for emergency use authorization? What's the progress made, sir?
So thank you for having me on your show. I'm very happy to say that the first DNA vaccine, which is a ZyCoV-D, is coming very close to approval. We have mostly finished all our recruitment. We have by far recruited the largest number of patients in India, which is 28,000 volunteers who have been vaccinated as part of the trial. This is by far one of the largest trials that has been conducted. We are looking that we will hope to see our efficacy data in the month of May, which is this month. And as soon as we get to see strong efficacy, which correlates to a strong immunogenicity in phase 2, we will look to file for an emergency use authorization. We hope to produce a good amount of quantities starting month of July onwards and make sure that we are making the vaccine available, which is the need of the hour right now.
And when do we expect then you to move for emergency use authorization?
So as I said, we've finished majority of the recruitment. The recruitment holds very important milestones in terms of cohorts because we have obviously the elderly and the comorbid people, but also children between the ages of 12 to 18. So once we are able to get an event data, which we hope which will happen in the middle of May, we should then immediately be able to apply for emergency use.
All right. So the good news here is that by May or so, you will be at least in a position to move the regulators and talk to them about restricted use of this vaccine, sir.
That's right. So the regulatory process is a rolling NDA kind of process. So I believe the regulators do look at this data in a short period of time, and we have submitted a lot of data already. So this will aid the regulators in helping us approve this vaccine once we provide them the efficacy results.
Here's a special report on the revised guidelines for RT-PCR tests. This is what the Indian Council of Medical Research is now telling us. This is news you can use. As India witnesses an exponential surge in cases of COVID-19, the Indian Council of Medical Research has released a new set of guidelines for testing. Well, they especially focused on reducing the practice of undergoing RT-PCR tests in order to take the load off the existing labs. Here's when RT-PCR test is not required. If rapid antigen tests identified a patient as COVID positive, then one doesn't need to go for an RT-PCR test. If RT-PCR test has identified a patient as positive once, well, if one has been in home isolation for 10 days with no fever or any other symptom, at the time of getting discharged from the hospital, an RT-PCR test again is not required. If a healthy individual has undertaken interstate travel, then an RT-PCR test is not required. At present, testing is being conducted in 2,506 labs in India, and the decision is aimed at preventing them from being burdened as cases are increasing. To help the exhausted labs, the ICMR is now suggesting rapid antigen tests for mass detection. It has said that rapid antigen tests should be allowed in government and private healthcare facilities across the country, in cities, towns, schools, colleges, and community centers. The ICMR also suggested creating drive-through rapid antigen test facilities. So when to do an RT-PCR test then? The ICMR has said if an individual has been identified as negative by rapid antigen test, continues to have symptoms, then by all means go ahead for an RT-PCR test. The vaccination status of an individual tested for COVID-19 must be entered into the sample referral form in the RT-PCR app, both for individuals tested by RT-PCR and rapid antigen test. Also, the Indian Council of Medical Research has said that now states are in fact insisting on a negative RT-PCR test if there is interstate travel. That clearly is not required, is what both the government and the scientific community, the Indian Council of Medical Research, are suggesting. Well, it's time for a quick break here. Much more on the other side of COVID 360. India's task force, the Lancet Commission on COVID-19, is suggesting some measures to contain the infection, and it says that this should be beyond the binary discussion on the nationwide lockdown. There are a series of area-specific measures it suggests, as it underscores that the fast-moving pandemic and the second wave took India by surprise. No national lockdown, no insistence on RT-PCR tests during interstate travel, and ban on indoor gatherings of more than 10 people. These are some of the recommendations made by the country's task force to the government of India as it battles the raging second wave. Amidst a growing clamour for a pause, the panel says a localized response is what is required. For this, categorization on low and medium risks and a third category of hotspots would help. Depending on how far they have used ICU capacity, the testing rates and the 7-day moving average in cases, and also the test positivity ratio.
We need to identify these areas and reduce the speed of transmission, especially in areas with high transmission, by doing local lockdowns or regional lockdowns. So therefore, having national lockdown will not be useful in reducing overall. For this, we have given the guidelines.
India's R rate shows one infected person is infecting 1.5 individuals. At this rate, each infected individual is infecting another 1.5 persons. The rate of increase in reported new cases averaged 6.8% for the month of April nationwide, while the rate of increase in reported new deaths averaged 8.3% over the same period. With over 3 million active cases, the healthcare system is under severe strain. It is imperative, therefore, to reduce the continuous rise in new cases. Given the exposure of the fault lines in the medical system, the panel has asked for ramping up supply to prepare for future peaks and to train medical staff, interns and residents and use them as a backup.
India Task Force Lancet Commission, we talk about upping the medical preparedness, for which we recommend training residents and medical students as backup. People can do simple things like taking care of, measuring oxygen levels or pooling and optimizing resources, as well as expanding their role of these residents in offering supervised home care.
It has also asked for the need to ramp up genome sequencing to 5% of all tests and said there should be no restrictions on domestic travel, and also says RTPCR tests should not be required during interstate travel.
We've organized these into 4 categories. The first is around saving lives and combating the illness by ramping up the medical system. The second set of measures is around minimizing transmission. The third set of measures are around containment of the epidemic by ramping up testing and contact tracing and isolation. And the last set of measures are around open communication, using data for better decision making.
Among other suggestions made, a complete ban on gatherings of more than 10 people, closure of indoor spaces, mandatory universal mask wearing in confined spaces and outdoors as well, and focus on cross-ventilation of indoor spaces. It talks about greater community involvement and also credible and regular projections of the trajectory of the pandemic. There is no one single response to the pandemic, is what the task force has told the government in its report. It can take the best performing countries by surprise. The pandemic is a fast-moving one and it took India by surprise. It says because the pandemic is a fast-moving one, the response to the same also should be rather dynamic. In New Delhi, Sneha Mordani for India Today. Also, speaking to India Today, Zydus Cadila's managing director has said he believes the company's drug, Virafin, which has got emergency use authorization, is possibly better than remdesivir. Here's more on why this antiviral drug could just help us. Mr. Patel, Zydus Cadila was recently in news also for Virafin. It's a repurposed drug. Just tell us why Virafin is so important right now, because doctors all over are talking about extreme respiratory distress being seen in patients, and this medication helps to a great extent in tackling with that problem. Tell us a little more about how that works.
So again, I think this is a very good innovation that has happened, which is the need of the hour for our country. Interferons are the first, they are naturally occurring protections for the human body. They're produced by the human cell. Any virus infection, the first mechanism of protecting our human body is to make sure that interferons are produced, and they stop virus replication, and then they help the immune system remove the virus from the body. So what we have been able to do is produce these interferons outside and make them long acting. One dose of this is equivalent to significant amount of doses of any other antiviral. In our study that we have done, we have shown that pegylated interferon is multi-times more potent than any antiviral, including remdesivir in our country. So we believe that if the treatment of an antiviral is given early on, it is just a single dose, can be given by any medical practitioner and doesn't need an hospital setting, it would reduce the viral load significantly. And that is what we could show in our study, which we did on the patients, where we showed significant reduction in requirement of oxygen. We showed RT-PCR negative by day 7. We showed a statistically reduced amount of symptoms which are seen. And on the WHO ordinance scale of efficacy, we showed a 2-point improvement by day 8. And these were all patients who are already moderate. So I believe if you are able to treat patients early, it being an antiviral, we would see even far better data in terms of the responses, and hopefully help people not needing to get to hospital or needing further support of oxygen.
Mr. Patel, the argument against many of the medicines that are being used right now to manage the infection is that they are very, very expensive. In that sense, what's the cost of Virafin?
So currently the mode of treatment we all know, right? For anybody who's getting treated with a strong antiviral, is the standard of choice is remdesivir, which is obviously you have to give 6 injections and you obviously have to be hospitalized. So this doesn't require any hospital setting. So the overall cost of treatment will be at least 1/5 of the current standard of care.
There is a surge in demand for plasma given the situation in the country with many cases of COVID-19 surfacing and many patients requiring convalescent plasma. Here's all that you need to know about who can then donate plasma. This is news you can use. Well, India is experiencing a huge surge in cases of COVID-19, and amid this, urges and cries for help from people are being heard from all across the country to come forward and donate plasma. How does plasma therapy really work? Well, plasma is the fluid component of our blood. About 55% of our blood is plasma and the remaining 45% are red blood cells, white blood cells and platelets that are suspended in the plasma. If you fully recovered from a verified COVID-19 diagnosis, the plasma in your blood may contain COVID-19 antibodies that can actually attack the virus. This convalescent plasma is being evaluated as a possible treatment for currently ill COVID-19 patients. Each plasma donation is used to treat 2 patients. Plasma can be donated only once in every 14 days up to 2 months of recovery. A donor can donate plasma up to 3 times. So who can donate plasma? Then if you have that question, listen to this. The person should be previously confirmed positive for COVID-19 by a lab test. Person should be between the age of 18 and 60 years of age. Women should be above the age of 18 years of age and should never have been pregnant. Weigh more than 50 kgs. Recovered from COVID-19 infection and have been symptom-free for at least 14 days or so. Found negative for all pre-donation testing for relevant transfusion transmitted infections, meeting all other blood donation criteria. Who can then not donate plasma? Women who have given birth, people with diabetes, hypertension, BP above the age of 140, people with chronic kidney, heart, lung, liver diseases, cancer survivors. Well, if you meet these requirements, then do come forward and donate your plasma and save a COVID patient in need, because that's what matters at the end of the day. Saving life is extremely important. Well, that's all we could pack in today's edition of COVID 360. Until next time, stay safe, be well.